It's midnight here, where I am, on a very cold day, and you find me in a very philosophical mood. I had grand plans to create a devlog talking about really technical processes, going through using Adventure Game Studio and setting up a room. But you've caught me in a more philosophical mood, so you're going to get me rambling instead, with no script and no plan, just some thoughts. I've been thinking about how when I was little I used to create things because it was how I made sense of the world, and I enjoyed it and I was curious about things. I was quite lucky that I had my own computer in my bedroom from being fairly young, when that wasn't a very normal thing to do, but my dad was into computers, so whenever he replaced bits of his computer he would donate them, and he sort of made me my own computer. And I remember getting games like Civilization 2 and looking in the files and realizing that I could change those files. I could change the numbers and I could change the graphics. And it was this really creative and fun thing, and I enjoyed doing it. There came a point, and I don't know when it was, but there became this shift in my mind where creative things to me stopped just being about having fun in my bedroom, making comics on A4 printer paper, or making weird games in PowerPoint that were just for my own benefit. And I started to think about creative success. And I started to think about a future where I was an adult and where I would be living off creative works, and where I would have some kind of fame from creative works. And it seemed so simple and straightforward at that stage. I can't emphasize how much I honestly, truly believed that was my future. This wasn't just me having an imagining. I really, truly believed that this was my future. I'm always really embarrassed to tell people I moved around a lot when I was a child, lived in lots of different houses, and this used to really worry me because I was like, where are they going to put the blue plaque? Where's the museum going to be? And that's just, I mean, it's just so silly, but I genuinely wanted that to be my future. And I don't think it was just a kind of self-importance and having this big ego. I think a lot of the reason that I used to feel that way is because when I was bullied, or when I felt lonely, or when things went wrong in my life, I created this narrative of justification in my head. It was all part of my story. You know, someday they're going to write my autobiography. They're going to look at my life and they're going to say, oh, well, you know, she was bullied when she was 11. You know, nobody was her friend. But of course she triumphed in the end, didn't she? And it became really important to me that was how the story had to end. That was how the story had to continue. For the suffering that I was experiencing. And I had a pretty good childhood, to be honest. But, you know, that kind of every hardship that I faced, if my cat died, I used to envision it as kind of a chapter in my autobiography. And I think even into my 20s, perhaps I had more realistic expectations, but I still felt that in some way I'd be some exception and I would kind of win out in the end. I turned 30 this year, and it was really hitting me that mainstream success is unlikely to happen to me. I've finished lots of comics, but, you know, none of them win awards. They don't push envelopes. My artwork's nothing special. Debatable whether it's to a kind of professional standard. As for making games, well, I'm completely new to it, complete hobbyist. But I've realised that dream of mainstream success, it really is a dream. It's not a reflection of the real world. Even for the people who seem to have attained it, it's still wrapped up in layers of illusion. Since this is a Sherlock Holmes game I'm creating, I have to think about Arthur Conan Doyle. There is a man who created one of the most beloved fictional characters of all time, And yet he said, if in 100 years I'm remembered primarily as the man who created Sherlock Holmes, I'll consider my life to have been a failure. How can someone who created something which has brought so many people so much joy have thought that? That's such a sad thing, that it wasn't enough for him. It didn't satisfy him. Agatha Christie, same kind of thing. You know, she really wanted to create serious literature. And I think it was always a point of pain for her that she was just creating silly mysteries, you know? Or Tove Jansson, who created the Moomins, had a really rocky relationship with them. She wanted to be a serious artist, you know, whatever that means. Why are the Moomins not serious art? Why are Poirot stories not serious art? Why is Sherlock Holmes not a good legacy? What was it that was making all these people feel that way? A lot of these people with incredible legacies weren't made satisfied by those legacies. It's also struck me recently how this idea of a legacy, having a creative legacy, it's often due to luck, and it often doesn't occur within a person's lifetime, and it often isn't sustained. Sherlock Holmes, the fandom there, I think it's had this sustained interest. You know, it was hugely popular at the time, but frankly, lots of things are hugely popular in their own time, and they fizzle out. But Sherlock Holmes had this kind of afterlife where people who remembered the 1890s in this fond, nostalgic way clung onto those stories in a way that they hadn't before because of the First World War. And, you know, there were adaptations and it had this afterlife. Compare that with, there's a writer called L.T. Mead. I had never heard of L.T. Mead. Neither of you, I would imagine. She was somebody else publishing in the Strand magazine and lots of other places around the same time as Arthur Conan Doyle. She produced 280 books, I think, in her lifetime. They're brilliant books. They're really fun. I mean, they're kind of pulpy, but they're fun. She had a character called Diana Marburg, who's like a psychic detective. And there's this villain called Madame Sarah, who's sort of this beauty queen, and she's possibly immortal. I read a story by her called Followed. It involves this snake, and everybody thinks it's supernatural, but spoilers, it's not. And it's all set in Salisbury Plain, and it's very much like The Hound of the Baskervilles, but it's not retained in the public consciousness. Her whole legacy hasn't. She had success, but not fame. She brought pleasure to countless people through her stories, but she didn't have a legacy to speak of. One of my comics is currently, as I speak, on display in the British Library, in the Treasures Gallery, which was lovely. I submitted it to the legal deposit, which anyone can do if you've published something, and they happened to select it to be in this exhibition. And it really struck me like, that could be it. That could be the legacy of my creative work, is that it's in the British Library somewhere in some stack, and perhaps some doctoral student in 100 years' time will get it out and cite it briefly in their thesis, you know? This is all quite grim, but I'm coming around to a good point. Capitalism sucks. Sexism and racism and classism suck. There are so many reasons why somebody can be creating amazing work and not get recognition, or why the whims of fate mean they have no legacy. And even if they do have a legacy, it won't make them happy. Therefore, I think I need to go back to when I was creating in the way I did when I was 7. I need to enjoy making something and enjoy completing it and show it to people and say, hey, look at this thing that I made. I really love a book by Linda Barry, who is a wonderful comics artist. She has a book called What It Is, and there's this one particular comic in it that I return to time and time again. But I think it's just recently I've been through a similar journey to the one she describes myself. And it's called Two Questions. The two questions are, is this good? And does this suck? And she says, I'm not sure when these 2 questions became the only 2 questions I had about my work, or when making pictures and stories turned into something I called my work. I just know I'd stopped enjoying it and instead began to dread it. When I was little, I noticed that making lines on paper gave me a certain floaty feeling. It made me feel like I was both there and not there. The lines made a picture, and the picture made a story. I wasn't the only kid it happened to. Every kid I knew could do it. Before the 2 questions, pictures and stories happened in a way that didn't involve much thinking. One line led to another until they somehow finished. I never felt like I was trying, and the drawing itself didn't matter too much to me afterwards. But the 2 questions find everybody. Mine came in the guise of the 2 most popular girls in my 1st grade class. And they're looking at her work and they're saying, hey, that's pretty, you draw good. They liked me more after I made that picture. My teacher liked me more too. It lasted a few days. And she takes this story about how she really associated drawing and creating with winning people's attention and their accolades. And I empathise with that. I think it's similar to how I ended up associating drawing with being the thing that was going to comfort me, the thing that was going to undo any hardship that I faced. I think those 2 questions, is this good? Does it suck? I think they're the questions that Arthur Conan Doyle and Agatha Christie and Tove Jansson and countless creatives, perhaps all creatives, have been fighting against, that have been draining their love for their work. So you might be wondering what this has to do with a cottagecore Sherlock Holmes mystery game. It's mostly why the Sherlock Holmes cottagecore mystery game is happening. I just wanted to create a little place for myself. It's using someone else's characters, so I have completely removed the possibility that this is going to be, the thing people remember me for. And it's a game. I've never made a game before. I'm a complete amateur at making games. It's a genre of game which hasn't been popular for like 25 years. It purely exists for my benefit. And maybe for anyone else who wants to come along, but mostly for me. Is it good? Don't know. Does it suck? Possibly. I want to make something that brings me joy in this world where it's hard to find joy. And I think it would be great if in that process that joy is shared and the people who play the game feel it too. So yeah, thus ends the world's weirdest devlog. Sorry about that. Perhaps next time I'll do something more normal, like talking about game development. Oh, I'm going to go get some sleep. But thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. I don't know, I guess at this point it's the sort of time when I'm supposed to say, oh, please subscribe and like the... I don't care. But if you want to. Alright, my cat is meowing. She would like me to go to bed, so I'm going to listen to her. See you another time. Bye.